Welcome back, everyone. Let's just dive right into today's explainer, shall we? Today, we're looking at the grand finale of the truly incredible story of Dae Jang Geum. If you've been following the central conflict we've been tracking since the very beginning, well, get ready, because this is where we explore a massive and honestly incredibly satisfying historical payoff. We're going to break down exactly how this sweeping narrative resolves and how it completely transforms from a deeply personal journey into a literal groundbreaking moment for Korean history.
So, plunging right into the action, we're faced with this really fascinating premise. Usually when we think of a grand finale involving decades of betrayal, we're expecting a violent clash, right? Swords drawn, factions fighting, that kind of thing. But how does our protagonist, Jang Geum, finally gain the unrestricted access she needs to enact her long-awaited justice? Well, she doesn't pick up a weapon. Instead, she picks up a medical record. Which brings us to our first phase, dismantling the dynasty through a bloodless coup. Historically speaking, taking down a deeply corrupt empire almost always requires a bloody rebellion. But Jang Geum totally flips the script here. Instead of physical violence, she uses pure intellect and her hard-earned medical authority. She relies entirely on undeniable, documented proof. It's a completely different kind of warfare, and it's brilliant.
Her methodical takedown is literally a masterpiece of strategy. First, she leverages her brand-new, unrestricted access to investigate the king's past medical records. Then, she uses that information to trace this meticulous paper trail of the Choi clan's corruption. She follows the evidence all the way back to the heart-wrenching assassination of her mother and the unjust framing of her beloved mentor, Lady Han. And finally, she systematically exposes all of these deeply hidden crimes directly to the king himself. And the result of all this careful planning? It's absolute. The Choi clan's empire completely collapses, not on a muddy battlefield, but by being legally and systematically stripped of all political power. The corrupt members are either banished or eliminated by the state, and without committing a single act of physical violence, justice is finally served for Jang Geum's family. But the story isn't over. Let's move to our next phase, the final medical crisis, which becomes the ultimate test of her mastery. So, the million-dollar question here is, how do you cure the incurable? When King Jung falls gravely ill with this mysterious condition, the stakes absolutely skyrocket. They couldn't be higher. The senior male royal physicians, who are the most educated, powerful doctors in the land, are completely baffled. They're totally paralyzed by the terrifying thought of what happens to them if the king dies under their care.
But while the senior physicians cower in fear, Jang Geum steps right up. To save the king, she realizes she has to pull from literally everything she's learned her entire life. She devises this wildly radical treatment plan that synthesizes her foundational knowledge of food science with her advanced medical science. It's this holistic, totally out-of-the-box approach that no traditional doctor of that era would have ever even considered attempting.
This leads us right into our third section, shattering the glass ceiling, and a massive historical climax. To truly appreciate the absolute magnitude of her victory here, we have to understand her environment. The Joseon dynasty was this incredibly rigid, deeply patriarchal society. Women, and especially women born to commoners or former slaves, exactly like Jang Geum, held absolutely zero political power. The social hierarchy was essentially carved in stone, which made upward mobility virtually impossible. But against all of those impossible odds, her radical treatment actually works. She cures the king. And in response, King Jung does something completely unprecedented. He appoints her as his personal, supreme royal physician. He is literally entrusting his life to a woman of common birth. As you can imagine, the immediate fallout from this is explosive. This appointment sends absolute shockwaves through the entire government. It thoroughly outrages the traditional male scholars who simply cannot fathom a woman, let alone one from her background, holding such immense authority and rank. But it happened. In one swift royal decree, she completely shatters centuries of rigid historical and social precedent.
Let's bring it all together in our final section, the legacy of Dae Jang Geum, going from orphan to legend.
To really cement her new status, the king bestows upon her an incredibly rare honorific title, Dae, which translates directly to the Great. So she's no longer just Jang Geum the skilled physician or the former kitchen maid. She is officially and forever transformed into Dae Jang Geum. This creates such an immense emotional bookend to her journey. Just think about it for a second. She started out as this tiny, terrified, orphaned girl, standing completely alone at those imposing palace gates. And now she's the powerful, revered Dae Jang Geum, holding the absolute highest medical office in the land, standing proudly beside the king himself.
But honestly, here is the most mind-blowing reality of this whole explainer. Her name and her achievements are permanently recorded in the actual annals of the Joseon dynasty. She isn't just some character in a gripping television drama. She's a highly documented, real historical figure who achieved all of this in reality, pushing back against the immense pressure of the real Joseon era.
I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. Did this orphaned kitchen maid simply fulfill her mother's dying wish? Or did she permanently rewrite the very fabric of history? When you truly grasp the sheer magnitude of her real-world legacy, it kind of changes how we view history itself, doesn't it? It proves that sometimes the most impenetrable dynasties are dismantled not with a sword, but with a brilliant mind. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep learning.